All right, I think we're at about time. Welcome. Welcome to the National Museum of the American Indian, and welcome to our physical and our virtual audiences. We are webcasting this presentation internationally, so I also have to ask you one tiny favor to please turn off your cell phones right now. Thank you. My name is Alexandra Harris. I'm an editor in the publications office here at the museum, and I was the project editor for the exhibition in the publication on Horace Pulah's photography. In honor of Veterans Day and the opening of our newest exhibition, For the Love of His People, the photography of Horace Pulah, today we'll be exploring some of the military photographs taken by Pulah in the mid-20th century. Before we talk to the family, I'd like to give you a little background. Pulah began making his visual history in the mid-1920s and continued for most of the next 50 years. His work is particularly significant because it documents a time during which Native peoples were somewhat invisible in America. So why were they invisible? Some of you may recall seeing 19th century sepia-toned images of Native people in traditional dress, and maybe if you're old enough, you remember seeing Native people take part in the civil rights activism of the 60s and 70s. But what happened between those times? Pulah's photos helped fill that gap. In the 1800s, many non-Indian photographers attempted to capture what they believed was a, quote, vanishing race. By the 20th century, with government forced assimilation policies, missionaries spreading Christianity, and Native peoples adopting much of mainstream American culture, the exoticism that those early photographers sought to document didn't exist in the same way anymore. Out of this landscape, however, grew a handful of Native American photographers, like Pulah, who documented their own community's experiences. Pulah himself was mainly self-taught. He was an avid reader of newspapers and of Life magazine, so it's unsurprising that his work has a journalistic approach in league with the Depression-era photographers like Dorothea Lange and Walker Evans. Instead of the impoverished scenes Lange and Evans imaged, though, Pulah's work featured the everyday life of family and community, simultaneously Native American and American, in traditional regalia and modern stylish dress, a window into life in Anadarko, Oklahoma. When you visit the exhibition on the third floor, hopefully some of you have already, you'll see the full diversity of Pulah's work. But for now, we'll focus on his military photographs. When we add a little cultural and social information to Pulah's visually engaging photos, they reveal deeper and complex meanings. So with the family's leave, I'd like to talk briefly about Kiowa traditional military societies and what the military means to their community, which they'll expand on as we look through the images. Through his own service in World War II and afterwards, Pulah photographed veterans' homecomings, honor dances, Kiowa military societies, and even funerals. While honoring veterans seems commonplace in America today, for Pulah, military service and honorings and events surrounding that service, it was a central focus of community life. His photos represent not only the military commitment of his generation, but a very Kiowa-specific warrior tradition that stretches back hundreds of years. Before the reservation period, prior to about 1875, Kiowa men belonged to several different military societies, such as the Black Legs or Leggings Society and the Ahoma Lodge War Dance Society, all based on family rank and the warrior status that he gained in battle. Honors gained in battle were then made public through ceremonies within the military societies. The war bonnet headdress, for example, is made with eagle feathers earned through bravery in battle. The man you see here on the left is Big Bow. His generation, and the generation of Horace's father and grandfather, were warriors in the traditional sense, belonging to societies and seeking valor in raiding other tribes and defending territory. The photo on the right features the same lance that Big Bow held decades earlier, this time held by Big Bow's descendant to honor a soldier serving in the United States military. This pair of Pula's images especially emphasizes the continuity of the warrior societies and traditions. But the societies were interrupted during the reservation period for several reasons. One was a lack of opportunities to acquire honors in battle. Additionally, in an effort to eradicate Native culture, the US government outlawed dances, ceremonies, and any activity associated with Native American religions, and this included the military society activities. While many traditions went underground, a few societies resurfaced during the next opportunity for Kiowas to earn honor in battle, World War I. It was World War II, however, that inspired a more enthusiastic comeback. Horace Pula's fellow serviceman Gus Palmer was a key figure in renewing the Black Legs Society in the 1950s. The ceremonial continues annually to this day. Kiowa women's societies also saw a resurgence, and you'll see them represented in Pula's photographs, supporting honor dances and ceremonials to welcome servicemen home. As a member of both his Kiowa community and the United States military, Pula's unique insider access allowed him to document the revival and tenacity of these important cultural events. We also recognize the influence of the Kiowa art of war on Pula's work. Art historian Laura Smith's, who's joining us today, recent research reveals the continuity of the long-standing Kiowa tradition of documenting battles and warfare activities through art. First on hides and teepees, then paper, canvas, and in Pula's case, film. His photography is not just documentary, but is part of the evolution of the warrior art tradition. Joining me for today's program are Horace Pula's family members, his daughter Linda, son Robert, and grandson Thomas. You'll find their full bios in our printed program, but I'll give you the highlights. Linda Pula is a former member of the Delaware Tribe Executive Committee, a health researcher, playwright, curator, and educator. For the last 30 years, Linda has researched and spoken about her father's work, helping to develop a major exhibition at Stanford University in 1989, as well as our own NMAI exhibition most recently. During his 27 years of active service in the Marine Corps, Captain Robert Corky Pula Sr. was awarded the Silver Star, 2 Bronze Stars with Valor, 2 Purple Hearts, and the Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal with Valor. 2 weeks ago, he was inducted into the Oklahoma Military Hall of Fame on October 21st, 2016. Thomas Pula is an artist and was heavily influenced during the late 60s and 70s by the American Indian artists of Southwest Oklahoma and the photography of his grandfather, Horace Pula. He hopes his work reflects the status of today's Native American individual, complex, modern, and spiritual. We'd also like to acknowledge the family of Horace's younger son, the late Dr. Bryce Pula, who are also here today. If you want to stand or raise your hands, we'd love to acknowledge you. Welcome. Thank you and your family for being here. So now I get to run over and sit with you all. So Linda, if we can start with you, I'd like to start by asking you about some of your favorite military-focused images of your fathers. We could start, if you like, with your family pictures of your grandparents.
Okay, I'd like to start with this one. There's my grandfather and grandmother, Kiowa George and Soma. Soma is the daughter of a captive, of a Hispanic or Mexican captive. Now, and he was full Kiowa. I know the story of of Soma's captivity, and that's for you to buy the book sometimes. Anyway, there's lots of things I can say about this, about my dad and his photography. And I was at Stanford for a year and listening to people talk about his photography, and I learned more there than anything. But he's staging, he's able to do the right light. Dad did not use flash bulbs at the very beginning because he didn't have flash bulbs, and so he'd take most of his photographs by natural light. And he was always, the people who came to see him at Stanford, or to see his photographs at Stanford, recognized that he had the natural ability to, with no education in photography, to be able to take a picture like that. They all compared him with Dorothea Lange, Margaret Bourke White, because he was taking pictures at the same time in that Depression era as they were, with all of their education. He had a 6th grade education and didn't speak English that well or understand English that well at that time. So, you know, I can go into all kind of areas of the war bonnet, of the buckskin dress, of the apparel. That's for another day. That was taken in the front yard of Kiowa George, his father's home and mother's home in Mountain View, Oklahoma.
Now, as I understand, Kiowa George was also in the U.S. military as well, right? Yes. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, it was called Truth L way back when, and I understood talking to people, talking to the curator at the Fort Sill Museum by the name of Tawana Spivey at that time. He researched all of that military segment. They evidently, the Army went into the tribes, the Kiowa and the Comanche especially, and got young men to come in and learn and be, they like to say scouts. I don't think he was ever a scout. I don't know. Tawana Spivey and I don't know. But it was that special troop that he went into and acknowledged today as being very, very famous. He was a very young man. He was very proud. There's a picture that I know of that he was a nice looking man. And so that was Kiowa George when he was young.
And Robert,
can I just?
You might have to just speak directly.
I didn't know where it came from.
Sorry about that. But Robert, you were just telling me a story about Troop L and
Yes.
Kiowa George.
Are they hearing me out?
Can you all hear okay? Yes.
I don't know what it's. It's hard for me to sit down and talk. In the Marine Corps, we had to stand up and talk. Okay, I do this sitting down. Troop L, if some of you read interested in history or not, Troop L at that time was the 7th Cavalry was stationed in the early 90s. 1892 is when they organized this. They tried this idea of making all Indian units there. 7th Cavalry was at Fort Sill at that time, and they reactivated Troop L to be an all Indian unit. Now, some of you may remember Troop L, 7th Cavalry. Go back another 60 years. It came off. I don't know what happened. Oh, I guess you have to ask them. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to go check with her.
Okay.
Sorry, go on.
Okay. The Troop L, 40-some years earlier, 30-some years earlier, at the Little Bighorn, Troop L was part of Custer's unit there. Troop L, to the man, was wiped out at the Little Bighorn at a place called Last Stand Hill. Troop L was commanded by First Lieutenant Calhoun, who happened to be Lieutenant Colonel Custer's. It was his brother-in-law. So some 5 years later, Troop L was reactivated to an all-Indian unit. I just thought that was sort of a little ironic that Troop L was now an all-Indian unit. But this thing only lasted till 1896. Then they did away with Indian units. Well, I had a picture, and I'll bring it out later on, of, that was in the pack, I left back there, of Kiowa George in his really different-looking cavalry unit. That was,
We can have it at the book signing table for
Okay,
everybody to take a
okay,
look
okay.
at. So here's another one. Linda, I don't know if you wanted to comment on this one of Kiowa George with Rainy Mountain Charlie.
Okay, I'm very intelligent, more intelligent than the other people on stage here, but I have I don't know, I can't hear you. I can't hear. So
Oh,
I
you
know
can't
what you
hear
said.
me?
So-
Sorry. If you wanted to talk a little bit about Rainy Mountain Charlie and Kiowa George, this photo of them.
Okay, Rainy Mountain Charlie was a relative of probably a cousin of Kiowa George. Kiowa George didn't have any brothers or sisters. He just had a mom and a dad, but and he was raised by his mother, and so he had lots of cousins, but he didn't have any siblings. So other than that, he was famous for being a sweat house doctor. He was famous for being I don't say like the word famous, he was regarded as in the tribe as being a good sweat house doctor. He was a healer in the sweat. Also, he was noted for the bow and arrow, making the bow and arrow.
So do you
And-
think he made these bows and arrows that we see here?
Probably, yeah, probably, yeah. He was kind of I don't like to call him a leader and all of that kind of stuff, but he was well thought of by listening to other Kiowas talk. You know, they talked about Kiowa George. He was, and I've seen pictures of him in other books and magazines, but he's always sitting in the circle with the chiefs. I have to say it, with the chiefs, yeah.
Now heading forward in time to your dad's children here. This is a photo of Jerry with his toy airplane. Did you want to tell us a little bit about your dad's love of airplanes?
Well, growing up, I knew Dad was in what we call the Army Air Force, and during World War II. And he was of the advanced age then, and so he was kind of recruited or whatever since he was a photographer, to go teach aerial photography. But before he'd do that, he had to learn what aerial photography was, so they sent him to Colorado to learn. And then he went to MacDill, Florida to teach and to work with the aerial photographs and stuff. Lots of pictures are in the collection of airplanes. He must have liked airplanes very, very much, because even before he went into went into aerial photography for the Army Air Force, you can see this. This is his son. This is before he went into this is Jerry, the famous picture of his oldest son. And, you know, people like to think Indian people were poor and we didn't have very much, and poor, pitiful us. Look at the airplane that this kid was on, and look at that uniform his kid has, you know. And there's a thing in the Kiowa people that there's a special child, and it's not looked on as the pet or whatever. It's just that way. And you can see this in Jerry. He's after a while, my grandma and grandpa raised Jerry, and so anyway, in the collection you'll see a lot of this little poor little guy here that's getting to have the metal airplane when no one even had a picture of one back in those days when he had one of these. So that, and then, but you can see as you look at the photographs over the years that I have looked at them and looked at them and looked at them, you can see the progression of Dad's love for airplanes, because you can see him taking pictures of airplanes everywhere. And I know when he came home from the military, we'd stand outside and he'd listen to that, and he said, "There goes the B-49, or there goes this," and he knew the sound of them. He knew a lot of things about planes. And he, it was, you know, he enjoyed, I think, being in the Army Air Force, although he never did get to go overseas because he was teaching. And by the time, I understand, he said by the time he got close to some orders to go overseas, the war was over, and he came home. And we got to, Corky and I and Bryce, Corky and I got to live in Florida. Bryce was too young, and at sometimes, and we all remember that and going to that. But as far as his love for airplanes, it was very apparent that that was the
Very
love of his
early
life,
on.
other than us, I hope, but that was
And speaking of his military experience teaching, do you want to talk to us a little bit about what we're seeing in these photographs of him with Gus Palmer? This is during the time he was at MacDill Field, right?
Yeah, okay, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what's happened after these photographs, after Stanford, after the photographs came to life, after 50 years. This is one of the favorite photographs that, the one in the fuselage of the plane. And, you know, there's lots of talk and lots of discussion about why this. And, you know, we all have our own opinions of him posing and staging. And I don't like to say my dad staged these photographs, but I think every photographer does it at some point. But I don't know whether this was a joke. This was I'd like to believe that he did this because he liked the plane, he knew what he was doing, something important in the military, and he wanted to show his Indianness. And he couldn't take off his clothes and wear breechcloth. I mean, and so he stuck war bonnets on him and Gus Palmer. And that, I think, represented both sides, both the way they felt, as being warriors, and as being in the military. And there was this very smart man told me one time, Dr. Charles Junkerman at Stanford. He believed that when you go into the service, the Indian male goes into the service in the military, and especially the Kiowa people, they're not even 100 years off the plains and killing each other and killing everybody else. And then they go, and then what? Now we're civilized, we're getting civilized. And so he always liked to believe that military thing brought that out and they could still be the warrior. And I think this picture has a lot to say with all those dramatic discussions or whatever you want to call it. But that's what I see in this photograph. Maybe Corky sees something
Same.
else.
I agree.
So here's Jerry, who we just saw on the little plane. Now he's all grown up. Do you want to tell me a little bit about this photo? Robert, do you want to say a little bit about,
Okay.
because you were telling me earlier.
Jerry has
about
seen
the
this
watch.
picture before. You can see the white thing around his shoulder there. He said this was I don't know when Jerry went into the Navy, 41 or 42, like that. But he said recruits coming out of the recruit training, they had that red thing on their shoulder until they'd been in 6 months or 7 months like that. This is a wintertime photograph. Behind them, it's been identified as a teepee. We who know that it's not a teepee, it's probably a summertime brush arbor, but it's now wintertime, and they've covered it with canvas all the way down to the ground. You can see that they've probably taken willows to hold the canvas down and driven in some stakes to hold those willows in place to keep the cold winter winds from coming into the brush arbor. And I remember going out to a few dances when Dad was home on leave or soon thereafter. I think there's a place called the White Horse Dance Ground. I think that this photograph was taken at the White Horse Dance Ground. And that was Jerry coming out of boot camp. Probably he did all his naval duty in the Southwestern Pacific, but that was probably Jerry coming soon after out of the Navy boot camp and getting ready to do his Southwestern Pacific duties there.
I'd like to add that Jerry, of course, was our older brother, and we didn't live. He didn't live with us. He lived with his mother. He was my dad's child from his first marriage, And so he lived with his mother, not in our town and away from us. We knew him, we loved him, we knew he was our brother, but he didn't really live with us. And he was older, too. And he went to Riverside Indian School. He graduated from, he went to Riverside Indian School, and I believe he left there, and he joined the Navy, and he came back again and graduated and joined the Navy again. So that's the vet. That was the veteran.
I'll add one thing here. That second time after he got his high school education from Chilocco Indian School after he came back from the first time in the Navy, and he got his high school education there from Chilocco. Went back in the Navy during the Korean War time, was on his way over to Korea, but he got stopped in Treasure Island, California, and he's my brother for so many years, and I never knew what he did in the Navy. I never thought to ask him, what did you do in the Navy? But he was on his way to the Korean War, and he got stopped in Treasure Island, so he spent the rest of his time there in San Francisco Bay, getting to Korea. That was his second tour as a sailor.
Thank you. So, one of the relatives that your father respected very much, you tell me, is Pascal Cletus Pula. And there's a lot of stories because he's the most decorated Native American veteran. And I'm hoping the next few slides are photos of Cletus. And maybe the two of you can tell us a little bit about him. And can you tell, this is an honor dance. And if you'll tell us a little bit also about honor dances a bit.
This is probably, my wife and I, Marty, my wife is 60 years, by the way. Raise your hand, Marty, 60 years. Okay, coming up. Okay. This was probably taken in her hometown, we think, of the Carnegie Park dance. This is Cletus. He's come home from leave. He's home, probably on leave, during or after the Korean War. During the Korean War, Cletus was got a battlefield commissioned as a second lieutenant, first lieutenant on ranks there. So he's wearing an Army officer's uniform at this time, so he's home on leave. And I think Linda could help me more about the women organizations behind there. I know there's something called the War Mothers, there's the Victory Club, made of women who support their men in combat, but other than that, I don't know. Can you help me out there? War Mothers, that's okay. The white blankets there, that is I know this thing, on the back of their boy, I hope you help me out, Mark. They got a V shape back there. They take the red, white, and blue ribbons and made a V. That's the Victory Club members. The women there in the blue shawls, I'm just guessing that's the War Mothers. And the ladies there in the buckskin, I have no idea. We've had some problems trying to identify the people there, and no one has ever come to complete satisfaction that we can identify all the women in those pictures. But I know the first two are Victory Club members, and I'm guessing the darker shawls and blankets are War Mothers. Other than that, I don't know.
Okay, to be a war mother, that you have to have a close relative, husband, son, whatever, in the military. And then there's another honor too if you've lost that person in the military, and that's probably one of the highest, maybe honors that you can get. But that's what war mothers mean. That's, and you don't get that honor if you don't have anybody as a veteran or in the military. So that's what war mothers mean, not women going to war, but war mothers.
We have some more photographs of Cletus with his family here, and his son especially. Did you want to talk a little bit about that family legacy?
Go ahead. Okay. Here you see people, growing up, we always referred to him as Cletus. Pascal, I think, came into being after his death in Korea, in Vietnam the last time. Pascal being, we always know him as Cletus, so Pascal Cletus up there. Looking at his ribbons, that's probably between World War II and Korea. He's not wearing any Korean ribbons up there, right? right now. So it's probably World War II ribbons before, I got that wrong, before he went to Vietnam. He doesn't have any Vietnam ribbons there. So it's probably between after the Korean War in 1953, it's over with. So this photograph was taken there. That's his wife, Irene Chalapaw. I guess that's right. Martha, correct me if I'm wrong here. Okay, Irene Chalapaw. And that's his namesake. That's Pascal Jr. I think that was his Audet Tali. That was his favorite. But you can see how he's dressed. And that's Audet Tali, Pascal Jr. getting ready to go to Vietnam. And that was, now Cletus, they said he was the most decorated Indian that we know of. I enlisted in the Marine Corps in 1956. Well, what I'm saying is, I don't think people know who was an Indian back in those days. When I enlisted in the Marine Corps, went before one of the recruiters there, he said, okay, filling out this form here, what are you? Are you a Caucasian? Are you a Negro? Or are you a Mongolian? I said, oh, I'm an Indian. No. Are you a Caucasian? Are you a Negro? Are you a Mongolian? Well, you don't look like you're a Caucasian. You don't look like you're a Negro. You must be a Mongolian. Okay, I'm a Mongolian. And every year they have this inspector general comes by and inspects all your papers there, your record book there. So we get called in the company office, and it's for about 3 years there. They'd check it out and they'd say, okay, Pula, Mongolian. You know, Mongolian. Just before I got out in 1960, they added other. So you could be Mongolian, Negro, Caucasian, or an other. So when I got out, I was an other. Nowadays, there's about 20 different things, you can be. If you're from the Southwest Pacific, there's about 4 different things you can check off. So when they say he was the most decorated Indian ever, who knows? You know, I don't know. Anyway, that's Pascal Cletus there, junior and senior.
Now, I know there's differing versions of this story of his passing away in Vietnam, but he, as I understand, can you tell me a little bit about his reenlistment and going to Vietnam?
I'll leave it up to Linda. I was on active duty at that time. She is more versed in what was happening back there in Anadarko, Oklahoma, when he went there. So.
Well, you know, I was living in Maine at this time, so I really didn't know I didn't go to the funeral, I wasn't around or anything. Our dad really loves Cletus, and I'll go in that direction. And I mean, he's got a big bust at the American Indian Hall of Fame in Anadarko, Oklahoma. And so Dad raised the money for that. Dad was really loved Cletus, and that was his nephew. His brother Ralph Pulaw's son, and both of them, Dad and Ralph Pulaw, were sons of Kiowa George. So that's the family tree, kind of. So anyway, Cletus became really. Cletus was the kind of guy that I knew, and maybe somebody else knew something different about him. But he wasn't arrogant. When he come home on leave, you never knew he was even home on leave. He ran around with his brothers and his cousins and stuff, and visited and everything, and really was reluctant and shy to even have one of these powwows for him. He was a soldier. He was a soldier first, and I know that he loved to come home and be with his family, and that was about it. Okay, as I understand it, he had the boy that you see.
Do you want me to back up?
The boy that you see with the cane there,
No.
he got his leg shot off in Vietnam, and he was at the Air Force Base in San Antonio in that hospital there, and the Army. This is all of his sons. All of his sons was in the Army with him at the same time in Vietnam. So anyway, the one of the sons got, while Pascal Cletus Jr. was and Cletus was either coming home or anyway, from Vietnam. His other son had got orders to go to Vietnam. And you can't have two people over there at the same time. And Cletus did not want the younger son to go back over there, to go, not back, but to go over there. So he took his place. Cletus volunteered to take his place. So he went instead. And the boy sitting next to the boy with the cane was detailed to Germany. And he died in Germany in a car accident. And Cletus died in Vietnam, being killed in action. So that is kind of the story I understood and have understood, that that's what happened. So it was a sad, sad, sad thing. Cletus was gone, Pascal had one leg, and Lindy died. And Lindy, by the way, was named after the flyer, Lucky Lindy Lindbergh.
Charles Lindbergh, yeah.
But anyway, that's kind of the sad. That whole picture just tells a sad story, and most of those people are gone now anyway. But that's the story I know. So he knows another version if he wants to tell that.
I'll go another direction there.
Sure.
About Cletus in Vietnam, his second tour. I was down in Panama going through an army school down there, jungle operations training school down there. And I met one of the instructors down there, was Army Sergeant First Class, who was, well, I'll say, use the term, he was a Green Beret Special Forces guy. He was with Cletus when he died. I won't go into details, but Cletus then had come back, had been discharged from the Army, had been retired from the Army, had come back in as a first sergeant. And their unit was an Army unit. Some of the, maybe the Army veterans, a place called the Parrot's Beak down in the 3rd Corps area, northwest of Saigon. They were in a rubber plantation. They were moving east, and then they had to make a sharp turn to go back to the north. And Cletus, this is his second time over there, realized there's something wrong here, so he's trying to move up front to tell the leaders up front, what we're doing is wrong. But it was too late then. The heavy fire started, and the battalion commander died, Cletus died, and I talked to the Sergeant First Class, and he was there when Cletus died. And it wasn't a pretty death. Anyway, that's how he died.
I wanted to turn to the honor dances. And Linda, do you want to tell us a little bit about honor dances and what the purpose is and who's involved?
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the biggest and best things the Indian people do in relationship to war. When their son or daughter or whatever comes home from the military, they honor them. And I think that was real important during the Vietnam era when those people were coming home, those military personnel was coming home and they were trashed and ugly things were done. But never did it ever happen to these guys, to the Native American. And what, if the family didn't have any money or anything, because, powwows cost a little bit of money. And you honor them, you give away shawls, you give away blankets in honor of this, or you give away money, you feed everybody. And this is what's going on here with the Virgil Swift honor dance. Virgil Swift was Wichita, and this was probably in the early 60s, and he was really good friends with Dr. Pooraw, and that's why I think that's why Dad went out and took that picture out in the Wichita country. We all live in the same area, the Wichitas and Caddos and Delawares and Comanches and Fort Sill Apaches and Kiowas. We all live in one area, so there's a lot of military people coming and going. And it's really an honor for Indian guys to go into the military. It's a big honor. And when they come back and call themselves a vet, that's even a bigger honor. But And these ladies that are dancing with him, his relatives, his mother's friend, his classmates on this side, and yeah, I never stood on that front row like he has, but I know there's a lot of pride in that. When either you're leaving or coming home. Coming home's the biggest thing that happens.
So from a community perspective, as somebody who would be home when veterans are coming home, how do you feel your community feels about people who serve in the military? Like as I understand, as you've told me, there's a very high percentage of your young men who serve.
Well,
Maybe I can help you out here. When I came home my second time there, we had a homecoming dance for me up in Carnegie, Kiowa country, but we had 7 different tribes there that are administered by the area there. That made a long day for me, starting about 1 o'clock till almost midnight. You dance with this group, you dance with that group. There's giveaways all the way around there. It takes a long time. Someplace in there, they said, the governor's coming out here. Well, the governor didn't come out there, but he sent a delegation out there for the proclamation. It's Captain Robert Poolaw Day. So this is what I came home to, and then they gave me a little pen that it said, it was a little cloisonne pen. Did I say it right? A little cloisonne pen. It was white in the shape of the state of Oklahoma. And I didn't know it then, but the colors, we got state colors, I didn't know that, green and white. It was a white cloisonne, shape of Oklahoma, outlined in green. In the middle, Proud Okie. So they put that on me. Went outside there and had 2 TV stations came in. I got 2 TV interviews just for coming home from Vietnam. So that's the big difference between being spit on at an airport or coming in to what I came home to, and other Indian veterans came home to.
So since you've had this experience of coming home, can you tell us a little bit about how what this does for veterans when they come home and have this community support and reception?
I can only speak for myself. I was, when I came home for that second time, I stayed in the Marine Corps another, 10, 12, or 15 years. So I don't know what the civilian community, what they were doing back there. I was in my community, my Marine Corps. Incidentally, I never made a Marine Corps my career, 27 years. It was never my career. I did it because I liked what I was doing, and I got to a point where I physically couldn't do what I felt I should do anymore. That's when I retired in August of '87. So I don't know what, I was always with my kind of people after I came home. And we all thought the same thing. We talked the same thing. We served together in Vietnam. Martha knows, she put up with a lot of us happy hours. She said, when you go to happy hour and you don't come home on Friday, I know where you are. You're down at that club and you guys are, I know who you're with. You're yakking until daylight Saturday morning. Then we go home. So that was where I guess I was a veteran then, but I was with people that I know and loved.
I think we're leaving out something important here. When he came home, my mother and dad would either butcher a cow or we raised a few cows, and we'd have a homecoming that you would not believe at our house. And we have pictures of that in the collection. And Mom was one of 6 kids, and Dad was one of many, 2 families. And so we have lots and lots of relatives, lots of food, and lots of fun. And I remember Dad crawled on top of the house one time and took a picture. We had tables in the yard outside of our house, and just full of relatives and kids and everybody, and it was a happy time. And to me, when you go over here and do a veterans homecoming dance, it's a whole different thing than a yard full of relatives. And miss those who miss that. But and I don't know if every family did it, but our family did it. And you get you get 1,000,000 different tribes into that front yard. That's a lot of fun. And it seemed like we ate all day. All day. And usually, hopefully, it was the time of year watermelon, and my dad grew watermelon and good crops like that, and we'd have things from the garden and lots of meat, lots of beef, and nobody went away hungry, but it was all for his honor.
Yeah. I want to switch gears slightly and turn it over to Thomas to talk a little bit about how your grandfather's photographs influence your art.
Okay. Well, initially I was out of high school. I went to the University of Oklahoma. I didn't really have a plan on what I was going to do. I just knew I was going to college, and I knew I was going to OU. I had a friend, Cricket Shields. He was in art school, and I would go with him, and he would be painting Native American paintings, and I'd sit with him while he's painting. And eventually, since I had done artwork in high school, and because of the influences growing up around Anadarko, seeing people like Doc Tek Nebuchadnezzar, Black Bear Bosun, and eventually learning about T.C. Cannon, it was just natural for me as a young artist to go along those lines. And so I attended the University of Oklahoma, majored in painting. And if you study T.C. Cannon and a lot of the artists of the 70s, they were using old photographs of Native Americans as a source, for their painting. So I guess I followed them as a lead, but instead of using somebody else's photos, historical photos, I had my grandfather's photos to draw from. So as I began making larger paintings and starting to get into exhibitions, I would use these photos as a source. And later you'll see one example of them. So what I'm saying is I began as a painter. I was trained as a painter. And eventually, when I was like 30 years old, I got to the computer and decided I wasn't going to delete everything when I touched something, and started playing around with digital media. And that kind of, there was a light bulb experience where I took this photo at the Allen Hauser compound, took it home, and I began playing with editors, really simple editors online, not fancy. And eventually I hit the Solarize button, and it's like, that statue of Allen Hauser became a really cool painting. It's like everything changed. And then this light bulb came on. It's like, well, I want to mess with this and see what this media does. So which eventually led to this piece here, which is kind of a composite of that photo. If you can see that large thing in the middle, that's an eagle feather that I laid on a scanner with the idea that a scanner is a camera. So it, use this photo or this digital image, and then began using all of these editors I could find, and I just kind of made a big sandwich, and that's what that is. And so like the little dots, those would come from a certain editor, but it shows the negative sort of in the background of little pieces. So basically I was experimenting and learning a new language, I guess you'd say. And my very favorite artists are people like Andy Warhol, people who experiment, or people who want to push the envelope. It's easy to follow footsteps of people who are going down the same path, but my favorite artists are the guys that are going over here and over here, which doesn't lead to you making a lot of money or anything, but it leads to a lot of personal satisfaction, and that's the way I approach art. So that's basically what this is, and that's my grandfather. He was in one of the very first Highway Patrol classes in the state of Oklahoma when they developed the Highway Patrol. He was a highway patrolman, and that's his son, Jerry. Well, it was untitled for a long time, but my son likes to watch the television cartoons, and there was a show called Uncle Grandpa. Well, that's my uncle, and that's my grandpa, so I eventually named this piece Uncle Grandpa. This is, okay, the main photograph is in the morning after a peyote meeting, and with every one of my grandpa's photos, basically, there's generally a long story, which we don't have time for. But there's a lady from Maine who was there who kind of sponsored this. It's my understanding she sponsored this peyote meeting, so she's in the photograph. And so there's this black and white photograph. I was working with making fractal images where you divide a picture up and it just, mathematically divides things. So that the colored area there is one of my paintings, which was fractalized. And then it's again making a composite of that. And I could never do this again. It was an experiment. I ran it through the editors, and it came out that way, and that's how I arrived at it. And that's the way I like to work. If I look at an apple and I paint a picture of an apple, that's kind of boring to me because I think every artist should be able to draw and paint and make things look like that. But to work with a media and come up with something that's maybe not been done before, or it's interesting, it's the process, I guess, is what's interesting to me.
How do you choose your grandfather's photos that inspire you to experiment?
How do I choose them?
Yeah, I mean, or does it sort of just a feeling when you see some that it inspires you to experiment a little bit?
Well, first of all, I would have to go back to, I think my grandfather was a photographer photography was his passion. Today, like myself and photographers, they see themselves as a career person, and that's the way they approach it. To me, it was his passion, because I stood in front of him like all of us, our family did, and it would take 5 minutes to get one shot. Today, we have a digital age where everybody can take hundreds of shots, throw things away. Well, he had one cartridge. He had to make that work. So he would take his time. He would look down into his camera, and I believe there was a grid. I don't know. I'd have to look at the camera again. But I think his whole thing was composition and getting everything just right. And then even if you're a little kid and you're standing in a field of flowers with your brother and sister, he gets it all perfect. And then he says cheese or something. And then he takes the picture and he comes out with these images. So I guess I like to use family images. If you want to go to the next one.
Oh, sure.
Like this is Linda here, and this is her grandma, or my great-grandma, Soma. And so, how can you lose? I mean, you have this great material. And I don't sell these like in the market. I don't sell them in galleries. Most of them go to my relatives or friends or people who do something for us, because I feel like there's a lot of Native artists today, and I'm not saying this in a bad way, but it's a fine line between self-exploitation and trying to build a name and make money or whatever. And I respect our family too much to kind of try to make myself famous off of this. So this right here is a whole different technique. This is a painting technique where I put acrylic on glass. So you have a film of acrylic on a glass, put a photo transfer on there, and then I can paint behind it and attach the support, which could be paper or canvas, pull it off the glass, it holds onto the canvas, and then you have a painting like that, which is a technique one of my professors used in college. So in a way, it's like I got behind the picture and I could paint the pink stuff and the blue and everything. So again, I'm experimenting. It's something I haven't seen anybody else do, but I'm trying to see how can we do this and what's it going to look like. But yeah, they're really personal. It's like you just can't go out there and try to make a money off of this stuff.
Can you tell us a little bit about what inspired you for this?
Yeah, earlier they were talking about Kawa George and that he was a medicine person. He could heal. He was he had a lot of things that he could do. But one of them we forgot to mention was he was a calendar keeper, and he had a Kawa calendar, which is it's kind of like a history book. And what a Kawa calendar is one drawing representing either winter or summer, and it's a mnemonic device where when people gather, they say, well, they look at the picture, and somebody tells the story of that picture, then the other guy says, well, this happened that year, and this happened that year, and pretty soon they could have the whole history of that year, remembering people's names, remembering the colors of horses, remembering everything that happened just because of that one picture, which kind of unlocks their minds. So I made this based on the idea of a drawing for a calendar, and the title of this is Glyph. Well, my grandpa's name is Pa Bo, and whenever you ask an older Kawa, they say, well, it means a big horse, and there's always different interpretations in our tribe, but usually they're correct, no matter which one you listen to. I've heard it was talking about old, ancient horses. I've heard that it's talking about, like, could be called American horse, because they had thoroughbreds where the Indians had smaller horses. So anyway, that was his name, so I wanted to make this painting of my grandpa with his camera and his name in a way that a Kiowa might do it on a Kiowa calendar.
We're going to go to questions, but we have time for you to talk about the last painting
Okay.
that you have in our collection.
And this is like very early in my career, while I was still like a freshman, probably my sophomore, junior year, which was around 1980s or so. And it's called 6 Foot Painting, but it's not actually 6 feet long. It's because there's 6 feet in there. Was a non-native lady and a non-native man who my dad said they were like peanut inspectors or had something to do with agriculture. They were at a powwow. My grandpa took the photo, and the actual photo is a full-length photo. But what's kind of ironic is one of the dancers is non-native, and so you have these 6 feet here, and that was the painting.
Thank you all. Do you have any final thoughts? Actually, I'm going to scroll back for questions. But do you have any final thoughts about your father's photographs before we ask the audience what they want to know?
I think maybe one of the questions in the audience, and I can answer that right now, is why are we mumbling and stumbling up here over our dad? Okay, I can tell you why. Because our dad never talked about his photographs. He never after he passed away, and I had the opportunity to bring the photographs back to life again, I got to know my dad a lot better in researching, and boy, he gave me a big problem that I have dealt with for almost 30 years now on who are these, why, who, what, where, and when. And I know there's probably a reason for that, is that I'm learning as I'm doing stuff, and there's roadblocks, there's this and that. And the biggest question is, why did he take this picture this way? Why did he do this, and why did he do that? And the hardest thing for me to do is say, I don't know. So I think everybody will agree up here that he did not talk about these photographs. He did not sit down like you would think a dad would do and say, this is why I did this, and this is why I did this. The only thing I know he did was make us stand for hours and pose, make us wet our lips and take off our glasses. And if we had teeth or haven't teeth when we were growing up, we either shut our mouth or opened our mouth. And a lot of pictures you see of us as young kids have got our mouth shut because we've lost teeth. Well, other than that, that's all we knew about photographs, other than sitting or standing in a hot, dark room, hot, smelly dark room, and helping him either dry the pictures or whatever. But we knew the smell of hypo, we knew that. But as far as who, what, where, and when, very little do we know about why my dad did the things he did. And that, to me, creates the mystery of it all.
If you all have any questions, I believe we have microphones in the back.
Thank you all. This is wonderful, and thank you, Alex, for moderating it. I guess this is a question for Linda Poulaw.
I don't know if we can hear
Oh,
you.
okay, sorry, I'll stand closer. This is sort of a follow-up to what Linda was just saying, but to do this research, was that research you did with the community in Anadarko? Did folks there know that your father was creating this record of their lives, and was that meaningful to them either when it was happening or as you were trying to document it and preserve it? Maybe, Alex, maybe you could repeat it. Sorry if I'm not clear.
I didn't hear.
The question was your community in Anadarko aware that your father was basically making a record of their experiences? And if they knew, was there feeling?
This is really her area right there,
Uh-huh.
yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I know Corky remembers that I remember it very well. As far as Anadarko making a record, Dad couldn't even make a living in Anadarko selling his photographs or whatever. That's why he had to go be a highway patrolman and be this and that, or be a farmer. And anyway, he couldn't make a living there because nobody cared about Indian people. Nobody cared about, God, let's go look at this powwow, let's go look at this dance. There was just no interest. And it's kind of still like that now. Corky and I sometimes had to sell postcards. Dad put them on postcards. That's how a lot of his photographs got away from us and appeared in all these Indian books with no credit to Dad. It's those postcards that went out that he put them at the bus station. He sold them at the exposition and for a nickel apiece and stuff like that. So in answer to your question, Anadarko was not aware of any kind of record, I don't think. He did have friends there, but not in the photography life. So I think Dad got kind of discouraged. I don't know whether he even knew that he could make a living with photography. I mean, he was just taking pictures. I think that's the difference between Indians and non-Indians. Money is a means to an end, and that's it. He knew money bought groceries and stuff like that, and he wasn't aware of the fame. He didn't ever do anything like that. He didn't. In fact, when people would call the house and say, you know, would you come out and take a picture? Or can we buy this picture? Or can we do this and that? And he'd say, no, I can't do that. Finally, he got to the point where he said no altogether, because I don't know why. I don't know why he didn't. Every time an opportunity would come into our house for Dad to do a show, he'd say no. The only show Dad ever had was in the Southern Plains Museum in Anadarko, and Rosemary Ellison, who was the curator there, worked for years getting him to do a show, and he finally did a show just a few years before he died. That was the one and only show he'd ever done in his life. And it's not because he wasn't asked, because I was there when people from New York would come and they'd ask if, you know, don't talk to him. I don't want to talk to him. I don't talk to him. And it'd run him off, actually. But, you know, money wasn't his thing. I mean, he just, you know, money was my mom's thing because she had to do it. She worked, but it wasn't my dad's thing. I don't know how to explain that, but I guess we like being poor. But anyway, go ahead, explain it.
Alex, could I add to that?
Please.
Just from my point of view, the question is like, did the community know kind of what he was doing or what he had been doing all this time? I don't think our family even knew exactly the extent of what he did, because he was really private, and it wasn't. None of us were like into that until they found the negatives and Linda took him to Stanford. Then we understood what he had accomplished.
Wow.
So so the community wouldn't know even less than the family, and we didn't realize it until after this was all brought out.
Do you feel like your community has more knowledge and awareness now?
Oh yeah, and at
Increasing.
one point, was it the 80s, Linda? The Stanford students came back with Linda. They got the elders that were alive at that time, and it was a community thing, and it was in more than one place, and it brought elders together to see these pictures and tell stories, and it was just a great thing that happened, I think.
This just wasn't the community of Anadarko. It was the Kiowa community, Carnegie, Mountain View. It's a big area that we're talking about here. These photographs were taken at powwows all over, not just in the immediate Anadarko area.
But it brings up a point, because not any maybe non-Indian photographer could come in and take a picture of community dances. So is there a difference? Do you notice a different approach in your father and grandfather's photos being Indian versus maybe what a non-Indian photographer would have access to?
A lot of the subjects in the photographs were relatives, so we're family. So he's taking photographs of an extended family. We're talking about the Kiowas and the Delawares, so it was more acceptable then. Just my opinion, like Linda, we don't know why Dad did. I don't know why he did some of this stuff here. He's got some pictures that just baffles me. Why? It makes no sense to me. So
And I believe we're talking about like insider and outsider. And yes, as far as inside, as far as relatives and tribe, he was. But when he went somewhere else, he became the outsider, just like anybody else. It's like if I was to curate I would never curate an Apache, Delaware, Caddo type of art activity because I have no knowledge of that, so I couldn't really be an expert. But he was when he was in his say home court. But he went outside of that office and photographed non-Indians, political events. There's oil wells that were the first oil wells of its kind. So yeah, so he would be both depending on the situation.
That's a great point.
He, I think he was born at the right time. The Kiowas were moving out of the teepee into the mainstream, and he didn't sit back and say, I like to use this thought. He didn't sit back and say, well, I'm going to take pictures of my tribe in a transition. That's what I hear all the time at colleges or universities. He was taking pictures of his tribe in a transition. Well, his tribe just happened to be in a transition when he was taking pictures of his family and his relatives and his tribe. And you can, when I was working at Stanford on these photographs, these students taught me a lot. They'd say, look at this, look at this, look at this, look at this. And they taught me to look at these photographs and look at the moccasins and look at the flapper clothes in the big collection you'll see upstairs, the flapper clothes and the Indian belts and maybe a moccasin. But the hairdo of 20s and 30s ladies. And these Indian women were also moving into the modern age. And we've got some in the book. We're going to sell books out there. In the book that we have, you can hear the interviews that you hear from these people that are from back home about these characters in the photograph. And it got us in a lot of trouble too. But anyway, they were thoughts of, well, why did you say that about my grandma and my great grandma? And of course I didn't say it, whoever wrote it said it, but it was true. It was true. It was these people. It was what was going on in society to these Indian people. They weren't only coming out of the teepee and using knives, forks, and spoons, but they were also going into another society and another brain thing, with the help of missionaries and with the help of everybody else. But they weren't the same way they were 100 years ago. They were moving. Dad, and I read this somewhere, Dad had that opportunity to film that no one will ever have again. It's over. But you have these people moving into the mainstream. And that's what I understand that makes his photographs important to history, to health, to everything, is because they're picturing these people that society has pictured, poor woebegone people. They got whipped and the heads down and the guy sitting on a horse crying and that famous picture. But Dad, if you really look at his photographs, they're a bright, happy bunch of people. You didn't have to stand there and make them smile. They were happy. But you can see photographs of these guys upstairs that they're stoic. That Dad puts them on where their chest pops out and everything. And they're proud to be who they are. And that's what I see upstairs.
Thank you.
That's pretty good, wasn't it?
That was really good. I think we have another question.
Yeah, I arrived a little late, so maybe you address this. But I live in northern New Mexico in Nambe, right near. We have a museum in the historical pueblo of Pohuaque next door. Is there any move that this exhibit will travel to other museums, especially pueblo museums? We have a nice one.
That's a really good question, and I can field that question. There's been, thank you for asking, there's been discussion over the years for traveling this exhibition. The original exhibition opened in our New York museum in Lower Manhattan 2 years ago, and now is opening today here. But as of right now, we don't have any plans to travel. But fingers are crossed, you never know. So please keep an ear out and keep in touch with us. Any other questions?
Can I add to that?
Oh, of course.
Okay. I just want to enlighten you people. We have 2,000 of these things. It's not going to end for a while.
I have a question if nobody else is stepping to the mic yet. What do you think we as non-Kiowa, as non-community members should learn from your dad's photographs? What would you want us to take away from these military pictures, but also the exhibition we'll see upstairs? Not to put you on the spot.
I'm blank.
I personally, I don't know that I want you to take that away. What I want you to do is look at my grandpa as a photographer, and then those things will come through that lens to you or whatever, and then you take whatever you can grasp out of that. Because a lot of those pictures that are chosen are really kind of universal. Everybody has a young granddaughter. Everybody, I was looking at the show today and realizing that. And being Kiowa, it would have been a entirely ethnocentric show. It would have been all Kiowas, and it might have meant something great to me, but then maybe the people wouldn't have picked up on it. So that I know as museum people, you think of everybody that's going to come in here, and they're not all going to be Kiowas, but you can respect his art or how he chose these things, and he has an amazing consistency to his work, and that I guess the question is, I don't even know if that's really, because you would have to be a Kiowa to understand those nuances, and we do appreciate it. And like the older Kiowa women, when they look at those dresses, they say, that's a nice dress. And it's not like the ones today. Today they have lots of beads, long fringes and all, which is appropriate. If you want to win a contest today, you have to have that to compete. But when those older Kiowa women, I've heard them, they say, look how pretty that dress is, and it's real simple. Mm-hmm. So he brings that, I don't know if I answered your question, but
no, and I have to say, I'm very thankful of the years I've been able to talk to the three of you through this time, because I know I wouldn't see half as much in these photographs as I do having learned what you see in the photographs. So I very much appreciate that. Any other questions? Yes?
We'll be quick. Okay, go get
And
my
I'll
pack.
try to repeat your
Get
question.
my pack real
is it
quick.
almost over?
No, wouldn't you say
That's
it's
just
quick?
fine. I'll
I'm
repeat
going to
it
give those
for you.
things away. So if you know where my pack is. Okay.
What role do the giveaways, things called giveaways, play in?
That's a good question. We can do it now.
The question is, what exactly are the giveaways, and what role do they play in say, honor dances or these celebrations?
Good question,
good giveaway
good timing.
question. Did you want-
You're going to see one pretty quick here.
Oh,
Thank you.
It was actually planned.
Here you go.
At the last thing, when you finish up, tell me
do you
what we're
want me to
through.
do thank yous and then hand it over to you?
Well, no, I want you to stay here.
How much time do we have? Or do you...
We have a few more minutes, but I can say a few thank yous, and then
And give us about another 5 to 10 minutes.
this is perfect
Okay.
timing, Robert. Perfect timing. So it sounds like if there are no more questions, there's one more. I'll ask the question again so it's on the recording. How did your dad learn photography? Did he have formal training? Linda?
Okay.
Long time.
By the book. He was a young man. We think around maybe 16, maybe 14, maybe whatever. But the railroad was coming through Mountain View, Oklahoma. Okay. Right before then, there was this guy, and he was a photographer, and he was a portrait photographer. And he came through and he wanted to take pictures of Eastern guys wearing Western clothes, saying I'm still alive in Indian country. Anyway, so he would take pictures. You've seen those pictures. You've seen them in magazines, in Western magazines, where they got boots on and doing all this stuff. Okay, he came by to take pictures like that of these cowboys, but not Indians, but cowboys. So anyway, Dad apprenticed himself to him, to this man, and he taught Dad how to do portrait photography. And Dad was like a sponge. He just absorbed it. Then a few years later, here come the railroad, laying tracks, and this this landscape photographer was that came ahead of the trains, taking landscape photography of where the train tracks were going to go through to Texas. So Dad had experience, and he apprenticed himself to him, and he taught Dad portrait photography and landscape photography, not portrait, but landscape photography. So he had those two tools, but he didn't say, I have these two tools now. He just had them. And so then he didn't have enough money for film, and each time a photographer would leave, they'd leave Dad with the camera. And so Dad couldn't run down to CV or whatever you call it down here and buy film, but he had to order it through Chicago. But then he had to have the money too, and then on it goes. So he finally got the money, he did this, but he did not have flash. So that's why a lot of these pictures, other than he had an eye for light, the famous photographers at Stanford that came to look at Dad's photography and compared him to the best in the world. Anyway, he said, how did this man do that? How did this guy do that? Didn't even know English very well. How did he do that in the dusty roads of Mountain View, Oklahoma? And these people who, most of them couldn't even speak English. What this guy is doing, it's just a miracle, I guess. But anyway, that's how, in answer to your question, that's how he learned photography, and it just progressed after that. But he had cameras, he had this and that. I'm told, shouldn't even repeat this. I'm told by this crazy that he dug a hole in the ground, and when the sun got how about that? But I don't believe that. But anyway, I was told that by this guy. But he did have his ways of doing that. Now those early photographs are pretty rough. So one of these days we're going to do a pretty rough show of those early negatives. But all the time he was taking pictures of his people, of his family, which was he had Kiowa George married sisters, which is very common in those days. He married the sisters of the captive. So a lot of kids, a lot of grandkids, he had a lot of subjects, a lot of people. So I can't even count them right now. But and all of these people were doing the same thing, moving on. And so answer to your question, that's how he was self-taught, in other words, other than these two men who gave him cameras and who kind of, set him on his way. And he liked it.
Let me add one thing here. Dad did not finish the 6th grade, but in his later years in life, he subscribed to 4 different newspapers, read them from cover to cover every day, Daily Oklahoma, Oklahoma City Times, Anadarko Daily News, and a paper that came out of then Midwest City, Oklahoma. So he read page to page, and he had his own typewriter. He was a letter to the editors type guy. Politically, won't go into politics now, at this particular time here, but that was him. He could, for no more than, didn't complete the 6th grade, but he could read a paper, and in his later years, his Bible. He was well read.
He made Corky and I take typing classes.
Only girls took typing in Anadarko, and I had to take typing. And he wanted me to take shorthand too. If you know what, people don't know what shorthand is probably today, but I did not take shorthand. I had to take typing, and that led to bad times in the Marine Corps. I'll admit it to you, people would ask me then, well, Corky, what are you doing now? Marine Corps made me a teletype operator. I'm a Marine. I'm a teletype operator. I'm not going to tell you I'm a teletype operator. Now, people, they say, what's a teletype? You can find them across the street in the Smithsonian, what a teletype is. A typewriter? Yeah, shucks. But that was my first 4 years. Then the last 23, I finally got where I should have been in the first place. I was infantry.
I'd like to also add, I think it's relevant to the question. My grandpa himself told me this. When he was about 9 years old, I think it was 1915, he was born in 1906, I believe, and his dad took the family out there near Amarillo, south of Amarillo, to Paladuro Canyon. There was a ranch close by a guy named Charles Goodnight. He invited the tribe out there. He was friends with the tribe for a buffalo hunt, which they hadn't seen buffaloes in a long time and hadn't had a chance to do such a thing. Well, while they were there and while they did this buffalo hunt, they filmed it. Charles Goodnight had a film crew. So my grandpa's 9 years old and he's witnessing a film being made, a black and white film. Then later on, and I don't know the dates, they made another film called Daughters of the Dawn, which did he participate in that film? But anyway, it was filmed near Anadarko, Lawton, at the wildlife refuge there. So I was, in my own mind, think, how much did that influence him, since film is photography? It's, the medium. And also, I'd like to add that they're talking about him being in the 6th grade from Mountain View, Oklahoma, which is a very small town, that one day one of his photographs would hang with 77 of the best photographers in the Museum of Modern Art, which is an accomplishment, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, we don't have any time for more questions, but I want to thank you and your family so much for allowing us to learn more about your father and your grandfather and your community's military legacy and traditions. On behalf of the National Museum of the American Indian, I'd like to thank the audience for attending and for watching online. The family and the museum would also like to recognize the late Fred Nwuxi, a former staff member of the museum and Pulaw family friend, for his commitment to bringing Pulaw's work to light on a national stage here at the museum. Thank you, Fred. Please join us directly outside the theater in a few minutes at 3:30. Yep, we just got a few minutes.
Okay.
For a book signing of the exhibition catalog. You can purchase the book conveniently across the way at the store. And Smithsonian members and staff, don't forget your ID because you can get a discount. And the family will be signing along with another of our valued authors, Pulaw scholar Laura Smith, an assistant professor of art history at Michigan State University. So I'll turn it over.
Okay, now if you, Kawa George and
Do you want me to back up?
Yeah, if you put that on the screen there. And this is a picture of Kiowa George as a private, Troop L, 1892, 94, 96, Lawton, Oklahoma. It's the 7th Cavalry. That was his photograph there.
I'll back way up.
Yeah, it's probably the
Okay.
second,
Got a ways to go. Here?
Right there.
Okay, now you can't see it very well there, but you can see what I'm wearing. Kiowa George is wearing one of these here. This is a slide here. That's what most of the men will wear these. Now this was made by a famous silversmith today, Bruce Caesar. I had him make some of these right here. Now the men wear them like this. So I would like to have, here's my son, grandson, Tabe back there. And I'm getting older now, and I'm forgetting names. So I would like to have, I forgot his name one time. He says, Grandpa, you forgot my name. So the lady who would not let me bring this pack up here, the lady with the red coat,
Elizabeth.
if she's here, I'd like for her to come up here.
Elizabeth.
And if she's not there, okay. And the lady who asked that question about the giveaways, if you come up here. And of course, thank you, boy, you would let me right into this. Now the women very seldom wear these things here, and I've got
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Bruce Caesar to make a little pin. You put over here. So I don't want to say the lady in the red coat. There.
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth, okay. I want you to have this right here. Okay. And you can see it's a character of what he's wearing around his neck right there. Thank you, Elizabeth. Okay. And the lady who asked that question, there you go. Oh, and the stones in here, these are, it's a sea, what is it, Martha? For the ladies. What's that stone in there?
Abalone?
Abalone. This is abalone shell here. You know, it's a replica of this, but ladies are very similar to this. So, Elaine, there you go. There you go. Yeah, remember
Let me
her name.
shake your
I just
hand.
saw there.
Let's shake your hand.
And I'm sorry. This is yours right there.
Oh,
Okay.
thank you so much. Thank
Okay. Now, two gentlemen there. The head singer today, I'll ask his name very many times. Is he in the audience here? The head drummer today? Okay. We've got him. We'll give it to someone that can get it. This will be for him. And Lamar. What's his name?
Walter?
Walter Lamar.
Walter Lamar. Okay, Walter Lamar is not here. Okay. And now I've got one left here. And Linda tells me, oh, you're there. Linda tells me that we may have did this before, but if we didn't, the lady at the green coat there back there, Laura Smith, I knew it. Look, Laura, come up here.
Dr. Laura Smith.
Dr. Laura
Dr.
Smith.
Laura.
And Dr. Laura Smith is also an author, too, of what?
And by the way, Dr. Laura Smith got her doctorate on Dad.
Okay. Okay, there you go. It's, you can make do with it. You can do something with it, okay? Okay. 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 Okay.
Thank you.
That's a giveaway.
Thank you. That's a giveaway.
And you honor someone for whatever you want to honor them for.
Thank you. Thank you. And please join us outside in a minute.